This morning, let's bring in our expert panel. Townhall.com senior columnist Spencer Brown and former Democratic New York State Congressman David Carlucci, both joining me at this hour. Gentlemen, thank you. Spencer, let's begin with you. What do you make of the president's decision to not just offer sanctions relief for Syria, which I think is a very big storyline, but also to briefly meet with that country's new leader?
Well, it's interesting here. Obviously, we have the first term to sort of look at of what his intentions may be, and obviously that's normalizing relations between these Arab states with the state of Israel. And I think this one specifically is very strategic because Syria has for a long time been plagued, obviously, with a lot of issues, bad leadership, a lot of, strife and chaos in that country. But what this does is by the United States making a play to have a little bit of influence and maybe a hand in their rebuilding actually is a huge blow to Iran and the sort of unholy alliance that they have with China, Russia, and these other countries.
I think you make an excellent point about Iran. David Carlucci, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is a good first step. We need some stability in the region. And these are the type of actions that can lead to long-term goodwill in the region. And most importantly, like my friend said here, take away some of that influence that these other powers can have in the region. This is something that is desperately needed, especially with the stunted moves of USAID that we've seen in the administration. Many good pieces of goodwill being displaced across the world. So this is much needed diplomacy that's needed at a critical time.
Let me stay with you there, David, for just a second. The president said this move is designed to give them a chance at greatness. And yet, if memory serves, it was only last year that the U.S. offered, I want to say, a $10 million reward for the Syrian leader's arrest. Quite the shift. And I understand there's an old saying in diplomacy, there are no friends, there are no enemies, there are only interests. Is that how you see this development over the past year?
Well, yeah, a lot has changed, obviously, in Syria. And so as things change, we have to stay fluid. We have to be aligned with the times and figure out what is the best strategy for the interests of the United States and our allies. So that's why I'm happy to see the president there in the Middle East. Again, there's been a major blow to many of the relationships through trade policy, through, again, USAID, major problems that have developed just in the beginning of the Trump administration. So I'm glad to see the president using his energy and his bully pulpit to bring attention to this part of the world. And with changing times come changing policy. So we've got to stay fluid and make sure that we're communicating well with these nations as they're emerging and coming out of some of their darkest times.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Spencer. I mean, obviously, as the old saying goes, information changes, situations can change on the ground. And yet I'm for one, am quite curious how you see the president's decision-making here, this idea of creating stronger alliances, sort of shoving out competition along the way. In this case, it may be Iran. In the case of AI and other conversations, it may be China. Is that how you see this sort of maneuvering being done by the Trump White House?
Yeah, I think the importance of the strength of these potential deals is backed up by the strength that Trump showed yesterday in his speech, which is something that the United States has been lacking very severely in the Middle East under the previous administration. And so having somebody come in and have what I think was a tremendous speech basically on all levels, but specifically when he was talking about having no mercy on those who threaten the United States or its allies or its interest, I think that sent a much needed message there to the Middle East. Because look at what happened in the past 4 years. You have the Houthis launching, basically shutting down the Red Sea and that major shipping channel. You have all these attacks against Israel that continue. I believe yesterday while Trump was on the ground in Saudi Arabia, the Houthis actually launched a missile at Israel, basically flying over his head while he was there meeting with all these other leaders. And so instituting this deterrence, and President Trump has a very good record of that. If anybody doubts whether or not he's serious about protecting Americans and our interests in the region, they should go check out the crater outside the Baghdad airport where Soleimani met his end. It's pretty clear that Trump means business, and that is what's needed to do these deals.
Yeah, spot on. David, let me ask you about the Gulf Cooperation Council, the leaders who are going to look forward here to the family photo. The president will also be speaking. Of course, we'll bring you that live here on Fox News. I'm curious about the economic cooperation. We're seeing lots of big numbers thrown about, and not just $600 billion here, $140 billion in a defense cooperation. I really think this says a lot about the emphasis of this president, his second term in office, and the Trump White House and this administration? What say you?
Well, yes, look, it's going to take cooperation, and this is a much needed step for the United States, and particularly for the Trump administration. Look, I think the president is trying to accomplish a lot. Some I agree with, some I disagree with, like many Americans. But look, it's all about cooperation. And that's why you see Trump leaning in here with his trip to the Middle East right now. But what's concerning is what's been left around the world with these trade policies, with Donald Trump's constant talk about countries paying their fair share in terms of defense security with NATO. We see major problems now starting to develop in Europe, where countries like Germany for years have been deterred from developing their own nuclear weapons. Now the Trump policies and administration are pushing countries like Germany to now develop nuclear weapons, and other nations that for years have really leaned on the United States to now develop their stockpiles. So I think this is interesting. You're seeing Donald Trump have different moves depending on where he's going in the world. But I think what we need to do is make sure we're getting back to this idea that the United States can be depended on, that our strongest allies are our friends, our allies, and in their times of need, we're going to come to their defense, no matter how much money they have put forward for defense spending. So it's these kind of policies that I think really make a huge impact on our trajectory moving forward. So it might be an easy conversation to say, oh, you're not paying enough money right now. But many of those words that are being transferred from the president and out to the public around the world are very concerning in saying, look, we've got to change our tone and our relationship with the United States. So I'm hopeful that the president can patch that up. If that is not the intent of the president, then he needs to communicate that. And that's why it's important that he's here in the Middle East. And I'm hopeful that he can make that same actions of goodwill across the globe.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point, but I think the administration's posture is fairly clear. Full freight. Listen, we have certainly done, I think, more than our fair share. It's been an awful long time, World War II going back some 80-plus years. There has been a stability quotient here and a reliability. I think you're right about that. But I think it's also fair to say these are economies that are quite dynamic and quite large, and to preposterously not contribute 2%, the minimum, in the case of many of the larger ones, and I'm looking at Canada as well, it's quite frankly surprising to say the least, and I think that's being generous. And I think you're right. At the end of the day, everyone needs to know that every tub on its own bottom. And in the case of security in Europe, that certainly seems to be the posture of this administration. I'm going to bring in Ashley Strohmeyer into the conversation. She is also joining us from